There was a couple that were squatting in the home. We didn't get an opportunity to talk to them. We called the police at the time, and the police had to deal with it.
How would you like it if someone moved into your home? And he's like, well, I'm living in my home.
So he just decided to move into the house, knowing that it was empty, and just make a statement.
Welcome back to Property Now, where our goal is to make you the property expert in your group chat. And today we're talking about, surprise, surprise, the housing supply issue and what could potentially be a surprise short-term solution. But stay right till the end because we've got some sad news to go through with you. Stay to the end to find out what that is. But first, let's chat to the guys. All right, guys, so lots to talk about today. Firstly, Jason, I love what you've done with your hair.
Thought I'd try something new.
Anyone watching, anyone who watches on YouTube will know Jason changes his hairstyle every week. But this week... He's just taken it to a whole new level.
Yes.
Where is he?
He's in Fiji doing TikTok.
Fiji.
Yeah. His TikTok career, he's blown up.
School holidays time.
Mm.
Fiji it is.
Great place
Beautiful.
to be. Shout out to Tourism Fiji if they want to sponsor this show.
Shout out to Fiji in general. We might have some Fijian listeners.
Great place.
We might.
Potentially,
True.
yeah.
Lovely place.
I wonder how, maybe we should dig into property in Fiji one day. That'll be a great episode. We might have to go there just for a bit of research. But Sav, welcome to the show. Savannah Lawbear. Please tell us.
Well done.
Please tell us a little bit about who you are before we dig in, because
Okay.
and you need to try and put on the sexy voice like Jason. There's a sexy deep voice.
Hello,
yeah.
my name's Jason.
There you go, Jason.
I'll try.
That was amazing.
Morning.
10 out of 10.
So Savannah. I am originally from the Netherlands. Moved there about 10 years ago now, so it's coming up real soon. Very exciting. I've got a little daughter who I brought here when she was about 8 months old. She does not speak a word of Dutch yet, but we're working on that. And it's been a journey. Really loving it here.
I can't believe it's been 10 years.
Yes, another year.
And you are head of customer at Composite.
Yes.
You work with all our potential property buyers, so you get to see the struggles that people deal with day in, day out. You yourself potentially looking to buy your first home eventually.
Yeah,
as
definitely resonates.
We're close.
So that's right, but it's actually how I got into Composite. Found out about it, and it really resonated with me as like a potential first-time buyer, and yeah.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
I know you've got some good stories to tell, and actually the source material for this episode today, I think the TikTok guy who we pulled some videos from might have a Dutch background. So what was his name again, Chris?
Jordan
Vandenberg or something like
Just
that.
put me on the spot.
But that's what this show's all about.
That's what we do.
Jordan.
Anyone on TikTok may know him as Purple Pingers. And he's blown up recently on TikTok. Obviously, everyone's talking about the Australian housing supply crisis, and he's sort of suggesting that maybe we should use vacant homes or people squatting in vacant homes could be a reasonable short-term solution. So we'll chuck a bunch of links in the show notes, PJ. But some really interesting stuff. He was recently on a wonderful show called The Project, which Chris and I would choose not to watch.
I don't watch much TV.
That's
I don't watch much TV in general, but if I did, that wouldn't be my show of choice.
But he got absolutely... He did really well. Sometimes the hosts of that show try and ask some weird questions, but I think he handled himself quite well.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic. But firstly, before we sort of dive deep into like squatting, is this actually a solution? Let's understand some of the stats, Zaz.
Yep. Alrighty, I've come prepared. So I wanted to, kind of share, I guess, set the scene with a bit of data around vacant homes in Australia, because something that this Purple Pingers fellow has been referencing is this specific number, which is 1.04 million homes being vacant in Australia. So this number is based on the 2021 census, which was the last census. I think that the next one will be in, 2026? But yeah, out of that census came this stat that there are over 1 million vacant homes across Australia, which out of the 10.3 million private dwellings we have, so it's about 10% of private dwellings are vacant on census night. I think something important to kind of consider, because you hear that number and you're like, well, shit, that's a lot of homes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that are without stable housing. But I think, that number is kind of contested as whether or not that is a true indication of how many homes are actually empty, like year round. So some reasons that these homes might be, vacant on the night of census, renovations, obviously, tenants, like awaiting tenants to move in. They might be newly built or bought. They might be holiday homes. And I believe census is in August or around that time of year. Like, it's winter. A lot of holiday homes are going to be empty at that time. And also maybe the resident just simply wasn't home.
They
the
might have been at a
census
party.
is being done, they could have been down at the pub.
Just out to dinner. Yeah.
Out for dinner,
Also,
So I think that's important context because
Or if they're selling houses in between sale of houses, that 6-week settlement period.
Exactly. So it sounds like a big number, but I guess there's like a lot of context to kind of like you see, people taking that number and really running with it. I don't know if it's like the most accurate figure, but that's basically all we've got in terms of understanding how many homes are vacant in Australia is that number.
The holiday home one's interesting because if they were at their holiday home, they wouldn't be at their normal home probably. So there would still be a property vacant. On that
exactly.
Exactly. Depending on that situation. So it's very interesting. But 10% sounds like a huge figure, which is where now our friends...
It's a huge figure considering we're saying we don't have enough supply.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's an accurate figure, I mean, we know that it's not going to be 100% accurate. There's going to be a degree of salt that we need to take with that number. But I think looking past what he's doing with just taking that number, I think the overall message that he's trying to bring or what he's trying to do is awareness to a massive issue. So he's got another, I don't know if it's a page or a website or page. It's called Shit Rentals.
Yeah, there's a website.
Yeah, it's a website. And people can submit basically shit rentals.
Yeah, and shit agencies too.
Oh, okay, so it's about the agency as well.
Yeah.
So it's basically, if you see that there's a property in your local area that's basically shit, but it's for lease, you can submit it and they'll go and do a video about how bad it is, and if it's mold infested or whatnot. But the people are still trying to, the landlords are still asking for top dollar to get this thing rented. So it's the shit rental side, and then also the squatting of vacant properties, which I believe he says if they're 2 years or more vacant. Yeah. So it's not like it's been vacant for 3 months. The activation or the activism that he's going for is if it's been vacant for 2 or more years.
There's quite a bit on the squatting side. Right?
There is.
And it's interesting because he's clearly trying to point a spotlight at the industry and say, hey, there are homeless people in Australia, or there are people that just don't have a roof over their head, homeless, that's a definition. So what can we do now? So there's obviously, we always talk about on this podcast, like planning, government incentives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But is there a solution right now? So he's gone to like an absolute extreme and saying, hey, there are empty homes. Like the laws in Australia for squatting are very interesting and probably a little bit grey. But basically, as I understand it, if the door is unlocked, you can go in, right?
Wow.
And
that's not great.
Yeah, if the door is locked, then that's break and enter. Okay. But if the door is unlocked, you can walk into the home, right? Now you can stay there legally, but essentially is what they're saying, right? And if the owner asks you to leave and you don't, then it's trespassing. Yeah. Right. But so we're seeing, potentially people being invited by Purple Pingers in his website, or he's actually pointing out specific homes that are empty where the doors are unlocked, where people could potentially move in, so to speak. I'm not sure what the laws are around how long you can squat in a house before it becomes your house. You have that?
Yeah, you want me to drop some truth on you?
Lawyers
There you go.
So adverse possession is what we're talking about there, which is basically claiming ownership of an abandoned property if you live there long enough. Yeah. So broadly across Australia, there's a few different kind of components, I suppose, or legalities around this adverse possession. So the person who is trying to claim ownership must have been in continuous physical control of the land, so living there alone or, without the owner, I suppose, for a period of 12 years. The property needs to be open and unguarded. The claimant has to have factual possession on the land without force or violence. So you can't physically remove the real owner through violence.
That makes
Fair
sense.
Yeah. That's pretty much. But 12 years is a very long time. So basically,
That's
12
long.
years
It
is
is
how
a long-
long you have to be living there.
Good return on investment.
It's a long-term property ownership strategy. Imagine how
And
much.
imagine the state
Yeah.
at the end of the 12 years.
Oh,
if you
yeah.
can't, like,
Yeah.
But imagine how much the property will have risen in value after those 12 years. I mean, this is
it might not be
from
standing anymore.
$0 to whatever it's worth. in
Capital
12
gains
years.
tax.
The, the capital gains will be one. Yeah,
I wonder how the
massive.
tax
It's huge.
implication. If they give it, yeah. Anyway,
If you've been squatting for 12 years, I don't know if I don't know if you're in the tax system. To be honest.
but if you own it, so you can own it after 12 years.
Yeah, you can claim
You can claim it,
possession, like it's yours.
and it is interesting. I see
Yeah,
like,
claiming ownership.
especially in the inner west, I see a lot of derelict homes and industrial sort of areas where they're obviously developer sites or potential future developer
Yeah.
sites that are left empty. So that's again another reason why homes may be vacant for a long period of time. Is that anything you can talk about, Chris?
Yeah, so we I mean, back when we were developing, we'd turn 8 or 10 lots into a development building, so an apartment development building. And while we get development application approval, the houses would usually be vacant because you just don't know how long that time could take. So, you obviously need 90 days to have a tenant leave or to send the eviction notice out for a tenant to leave. If you wanted to start the project sooner, you wanted to be able to have the flexibility to do so. And having people in the house sometimes becomes more problematic. So you keep them vacant.
And that could be an issue right now, right? So you just mentioned, hey, when in your development days, you wanted to build the thing, as quickly as possible, and maintaining quality obviously at all times. But you wanted to build the thing quickly so you could sell it, move on to the next site. But a lot of developers are holding on to their sites at the moment because of supply costs.
Feasibility is not stacking, so they're probably leaving those homes empty. But then they probably get to a state where they're not able to be rented because they've been left derelict so long. So then the developer's left with a choice, the house is derelict. So they're left with a choice, do I do some renovations and get it to a point where it can be available for rent on the market, spending money on a house that you're going to knock down? There's no return on investment.
Yeah.
So if you're going to spend 50 grand to renovate it, to then just knock it down, even if it's in 2 years, the financial decision there is to leave it empty because the income that you're going to generate is not worth the actual expenses that you have to outlay to get the thing renovated. So that's why developers leave the properties empty.
And I would suggest these are the types of properties that Purple Pingers is sort of reviewing, talking about, listing on his website.
Yeah, surely it would be a part of it.
Yeah, because
definitely a part of it.
It's true. You wouldn't be able to rent it out. It's derelict. But a squatter could move in. This podcast is brought to you by Coposit, where 10K means you can buy a brand new property. Check it out, coposit.com.au. And I saw this. There's another great video which we'll put in our show notes. It's probably an older video from either ABC or SBS. It's one that you found, Zaz. And they actually interviewed someone that had been squatting at a home. So this person was renting the house, moved to another rental. It all got way too expensive for him. And he found out that the house he had previously been renting was empty. It was unlocked. No one was living there, and he moved back in. But then there was all these sorts of questions around, what do you do for water and electricity? Because what I found out from this video as well, it's actually fascinating. But if you can't actually hook up water to the house because the water bill is tied to the address. So
you have to clear the previous
They
bills.
could find you, right? They could actually find you, figure out that you're squatting, and that's the owner could come and ask you to leave. And then you would obviously leave nicely because that's but electricity you can turn on because the electricity bill is tied to your name, not the address. So this guy had electricity, but he didn't have any running water. So he had I didn't know that. He had buckets of water that he'd use daily. His toilet situation was not good, but it just makes you think about what made me really sad about this guy's story is I think if you're homeless living on the street, then having a roof over your head no matter what is better than being homeless living on the street. But this guy was renting previously and chose to sort of downgrade to this derelict home just because he couldn't afford to pay rent anymore. I actually think that's a really sad situation that people are living in this scenario. So I don't know if we should be encouraging squatting. I don't know how you guys feel about this ethically. I want to take it around the room, and sorry to get emotional. It's a pretty emotional story, I believe.
I feel like there should be regulations around it, because really if the government kind of step in to provide maybe the running water, the electricity, and there would be an agreement between the owner of the place and the person living in it, so they would leave whenever is required. It could work for temporary housing.
So is that a potential solution, Sav? Because if you say, so Chris, we've got developers with derelict homes, no point renovating them because they eventually want to knock them down, can't lease them out because like it's not considered to be livable. But could we be giving them to people like homeless people like this, letting it run?
You can. But then the problem then is when you want to start to develop the site,
it's getting them out.
What do you do? It's not even getting them out. You know that they're going to be put on the street.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So what, like as a developer, like what would you want to do?
It's very ethical, right? So, but it's in theory probably great short-term solution, but when it's time to build, all sorts of problems appear.
I think as well, like, you look at even just looking back at Purple Pinger's TikToks, like he goes to a lot of these properties and like they're in a terrible condition. Like this is, and again, we're saying it's better than being on the street, but like a lot of these houses are unsafe. The doors don't shut. The people living there wouldn't be in a safe situation. So I think maybe it is better than like, I've never been homeless. I'm very grateful that I haven't been in that situation where I don't have somewhere to go. I'm sure it is better than that, but to say that like this is the solution to put people in these houses that aren't safe to live in.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, maybe there needs to be a certain
that's the best we can do. Yeah,
right? Like if it's really not livable and safe, then that should just be off limits.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of places, like we're saying, like being renovated, that's temporary vacant, but not in a bad state.
Yeah.
Another big one, I believe, and I was talking to some friends over the weekend actually, and they've just moved. So and I hope they don't mind me sharing this story. I'm not naming any names, but they were living in Western Sydney. They've sold their house and they're looking to move to like Sutherland Shire, so Gymea, like beach sort of area, Cronulla. Nice. And but they've decided because it's so new to them, they're going to rent for 6 months, right, before they actually buy their home. Which is, if you can do that, great. I think it's a good idea to get a feel for the neighbourhood, right? Mm-hmm. Finding a rental was extremely difficult. So and this could be exaggerating for effect of the story, right? But they kind of said there's like 2 rentals available, right, that they had to choose from. Meanwhile, because it's like beach town, sort of south, so anyone from outside of Sydney, like Cronulla, nice beaches, et cetera, jump on Airbnb and there's plenty available in the area. So the short-term solutions are there, but it's the longer-term rental solutions that aren't there. And this is the kind of thing that's effectively pushing up rental prices in the area in particular. And it's kind of what you mentioned earlier, Zaz. In August, there might not be many people wanting to rent a place near the beach, but so these places are just empty. Yeah. So what are we doing with them? Is there more we can do with short-term rental laws potentially as well?
Well, and there was that interesting, just on the like beach town, I forget the name of the council, so I'm like dropping half the story, but we were talking about it the other week, guys, where there was a local council, coastal town, and the local MP sent letters out to non-resident rate payers. So they don't live there, but they're paying local council rates and all that, kind of pleading them to, like, all these vacant holiday homes, to free them up to the local short-term rental market, because there were people living in tents in the town. Like, there's not enough rental stock available, but there's all these houses that are empty during these peak holiday. Oh, sorry, off-peak holiday periods. I thought that was really interesting, and in this particular case, I know the MP said that the reception from these residents was actually really positive, or non-residents, that most of them were pretty open to, okay, we'll do that.
So what did they actually do? They rented their places out during the off-peak times?
Yeah, so it was basically just because, like, a lot of these properties, I suppose, they would only they would just sit vacant when it's not, beach season, holiday, summer. And they weren't listed as local rental stock. So the MP was saying, can you free them up during winter? And so I guess maybe it would be, they were sort of proposing 3 or 6 month very short term leases, so that they could still use it over the summer, I suppose, for their peak kind of, because that's when they would
people go to those
exactly
properties.
There's a lot of demand, so they can charge more, blah blah blah. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting Interesting story.
Well, it's a drastic measure and probably a drastic time. And I think, to be clear, I don't think Jordan or Purple Pingers, whatever you want to call him, I don't think his solution is squatting in empty houses.
No.
I think the whole method is to bring awareness.
He's gone to the extreme.
To a massive issue.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the project with their excellent journalism
Fantastic.
Was that, like they really
sarcasm.
got like their pants were down in that
I agree.
interview, in my opinion. He held himself really well.
Yeah.
For like, I mean, to squatting, something that I don't agree with, right? Illegal possession of a house. I don't agree with that in principle, but I agree with the awareness that he's trying to.
Yes. Yes.
So, and I think I don't know her host name. I don't really want to know her host name, but she was talking about how being very condescending almost about so these people go in these houses and they just live there without electricity and water. And he was like, well, yeah, it's raining in Melbourne, so living in a house is probably better than just living on the street.
Yeah.
And it was just this, I think this disconnect between what the current generation, let's use the first home buyer age of 36, right? So anyone below 36, this current generation that feels this massive disadvantage within the housing market, I think there's a real disconnect between some of the older generation and what the younger generation are going through in terms of how hard it is to get on the ladder. And that's reflected by the age of the first home buyer now.
The host wasn't that much older than like 36, I don't think, right? There was another panelist who was a bit older, and he was kind of saying, hey, how would you like it if someone...
Steve Price.
Yeah, Steve Price, right? I didn't want to mention his name, but there it is. He said...
But he wasn't being... I don't think he was being condescending. I think he was trying to get to the issue.
he wasn't as bad as the host, to be honest. I think he was trying to evoke a different part of the conversation. But he asked Purple Pingers, how would you like it if someone moved into your home? And he's like, well, I'm living in my home.
I live there.
I live there. He said, but if I had and this is where he handled himself very well. He said, if I had a vacant property for more than 2 years, I would list it on my website. There's again, it's that this whole moral sort of area. Look, it is interesting territory. Because I also believe, like, looking at the holiday sort of house situation, if you work hard and you can afford a holiday home, then that's great too. Like, we should encourage people to work hard and achieve things as well. There's just got to be this sort of balance, and I kind of like what the council did in your scenarios as.
Yeah, well, I think it's another sort of short-term solution, right? It's similar to the go squat in an empty home. It's like, we can list some holiday homes and that'll add a bit of, like, it's not getting to the real root. Yeah,
I just
exactly.
wonder, but what happens after the 3 months? Like, they've got to go back to the tent.
Yeah.
So it's not a real solution.
Is it a clever, innovative idea to kind of, in the very short term, like, get some emergency housing available for people that need it? Sure. Like, but it's not really getting to the heart of the issue, which is like most of the things.
Yeah.
Has anyone on this panel squatted before or know anyone that has squatted before?
In terms of, I know Sav's got a burning story. I mean, we don't know them personally, but when in the development days, we had people that were squatting in some of the houses.
Oh, interesting.
But it was a really difficult situation.
So what happened? Talk us through that. What happened there?
So Daniel probably knows this story a lot better than me because he had to deal with it. But it was just a vacant house that we had, and we were awaiting development approval. So one of the councils here in Sydney, the development approval process took 2.5 years. So that usual issue of it takes ages to get development applications approved. It was a 6-story residential apartment building, but then there was a couple that were squatting in the home, and not like a couple like with a family or whatnot, but it was just a couple that had been on the streets for a while. We didn't get an opportunity to talk to them. We called the police at the time, and the police had to deal with it. But it's at the end of the day, the police got them out, and we don't know where they went. But
I'm assuming the door wasn't unlocked, right? So they broke in, like.
Look, they've been vacant, right? So whether when we bought it, a lot of these properties we'd buy sight unseen, to be honest.
Yeah,
so
okay.
we
didn't know.
We wouldn't know. So whether they broke or not, like, and like even from our perspective, we're not going to go and put charges against these people. I mean, they just want to live. Like, the house is already damaged. Like, any damage that they do, we're going to knock them down. Okay, so there's no criminal issues that we have. It's just we want them vacant. Almost, we don't want someone to die on site as well. That's a problem. So
it's a liability for you guys.
Absolutely.
It's probably not a problem for you guys unless one of two things happen: someone gets hurt, or they don't move out when it's time for construction to
Yeah.
commence.
We had one situation where someone set fire to one of the places, but turns out they weren't setting fire. They just fell asleep and the house caught on fire somehow. So, it's a tricky situation.
It's a safety thing.
It's a safety thing. Yeah. So that was on the development side of things.
Interesting.
What about you, Sal?
Yeah. So I actually, my dad has always told this story from when we were quite young because it was a big part of his life. So I think in the 80s in the Netherlands, there was a lot of squatting going on. And I think in Europe in general.
Right.
Social movement, and he was about to move out of home. So this was actually at 22, so quite late. He was looking for a place to buy, and then I think the way that it happened is that he was going to buy a home that was actually meant to be social housing. So it was just someone rich that bought it. He felt that it was very unethical that this house was being bought by someone that had a lot of money when people needed the homes, like in social housing. So he just decided to move into the house knowing that it was empty and just make a statement basically. And then he got more people kind of involved with it. And he did this for about 3 years. So it was quite a long time. And during that period, he moved to different places as well. And there was also situations where houses were being renovated. And he kind of also worked with the council actually to see if they could move in legally. They put an agreement in place. In one of those places, he didn't pay any rent, but the other place he did.
Okay.
And then they got renovated and actually ended up being a tenant there because they looked after the place, and because it was regulated and because they worked with the council on it, it was okay. Like it kind of
That's
worked.
interesting. He's like the original Purple Pingers.
Yeah,
your dad.
no, that's right. He put a movement in place, and there's now regulations around it because he was one of the first people that did it in that time.
Wow.
So yeah, he's very proud of it.
Okay,
So,
wait.
yeah.
Some of the regulations
awesome.
that were put in place. Let's
Yeah.
talk through that because there could be a potential solution here.
Yeah.
So was it council by council? Is this something that happens
Yes.
nationally in the Netherlands now? Like what's
No, that's
that?
right. Yeah. So it does definitely happen on a larger scale now. So it was in Amsterdam, so obviously a bigger city. But I mean, the exact regulations, I don't know. But I think that the council basically allowed them to stay there legally without them being able to get kicked out, without any notice. So them looking obviously after the place and basically just being regular tenants better than like I suppose the worst case scenarios that you hear about.
So the owner,
sometimes.
that rich owner that you said that bought it,
Yeah.
was it he or she? Did they have a say in it, or
Not really. No, that's the thing. Like, I think, my dad, I mean, eventually he did move out. And I think, with kind of some force. And I think the initial scenario was obviously unregulated more so. And I think the police had to get involved with that. And he did move out. But he just wanted to make a statement that he thought it was very unfair for people that needed those homes, just because someone rich wanted to buy it. And yeah.
was there hard economic times
Yeah.
at the time?
Yeah.
So this
It's
is
hard to get into the market as well.
and this is where I think we are today.
We're
Yeah.
heading there, right?
We're heading there, and
Yeah.
I think the government has, the movement or the awareness that is being created. I think the government it has to be very careful with how they tread on some of these issues. I mean, housing hasn't been seen in the last sort of 20 years as shelter or as a human need. It's been seen as an investment vehicle, which is fine until it's not fine.
Yeah.
And it's at the point where it's becoming not fine for a whole generation of people that can't get into property.
So the spotlight has been well and truly shone. Like I think as Australians, we know that there's a housing supply issue. We know that there's a crisis. And Purple Ping is probably doing a good job of shining it even brighter. But there's got to be a solution, right?
Well, there is a solution, in my opinion. It's got to do with social and affordable housing to a degree, but the social housing side of things, which the government is not building anymore. We know that it's been 20 years in decline or since they've been building social housing, so the people that need it the most. And it's leading to people like Purple Pingers creating TikTok pages and social media pages, putting up shit rentals and putting houses that have been abandoned for 2 years because there's people that don't have homes and they want to live somewhere. So
Totally.
Yeah.
that's the solution from the government to have the social impact to be building social and affordable homes. Probably the affordable home is the developer and government and community housing providers, which they're working on at the moment.
Yeah.
But the social homes component, so the homes that the government provides to people. And then I think if we can think of clever and initiative ways to, once they're in social housing homes, once they've been built, can we then put them on a pathway to home ownership if they want that? And I think that's something that government should look at. Rather than having, huge amounts of Commonwealth rental assistance being paid out. Like, why can't we look at building social and affordable homes that we were building in the past that we're not building anymore?
Yeah, we seem to throw a lot of money at problems, but maybe, what's the saying? Like, if you teach a person to fish,
Teach a man to fish, yeah.
instead of like you can give them fish
He'll
and they'll
eat
eat
for a
for a
day.
day, or teach a man to fish and he'll eat for his lifetime.
Why is that? Why did they stop building social housing?
I mean, the privatisation of it, and it's a great question. I think we could probably dig into that as to the exact reasons why. I actually don't want to answer that until we know why. But it just seems like it's been privatised and taken over by private developers who do a great job at delivering housing, but that's at a profit margin as well. So the social housing is for the people that desperately need it.
Yeah.
Affordable housing is where, so there's 3 levels, right? So you've got social, affordable, and then the other everyday stock that you see on the market.
Yeah.
Social housing is for people that need it. So they might be people on Centrelink, they might be who have a disability, who probably go under the other schemes now, but they need this housing. Affordable housing is for some key workers that might be on lower incomes, but need housing in well-located areas. So, as an example, could be a nurse that wants to live within 20 minutes of the hospital that she's working at, he or she's working at. So that's the affordable housing side of things. It's the social housing component that is effectively non-existent for the groups of people that need it at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got, if you look at government's role in, health, you've got public and private hospitals.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine rocking up. So the equivalent is in housing, you need a house, but there's no house. So the alternative is you live on the street.
Yeah.
Imagine if you needed healthcare.
Yeah.
And you wanted to get healthcare,
Yeah.
but there was only private hospitals and they could decide to let you in or not. You would die on the streets.
That's actually a perfect metaphor.
But you've got public hospitals where you can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might wait 4 hours, but they do a great job and you can get in there and you can get fixed, right?
Totally.
Okay.
That's
help.
the situation. And look, you look at other industries, it's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Look at the education system,
Yeah.
public and private. You can't afford to go to private, you can go to a public school.
Yeah.
Why are we not looking at the same with housing?
Yeah.
I suppose housing is something that's ongoing, whereas health, I suppose maybe the system can support it.
But
because
it comes
only
to it's a human need.
Yes,
Health,
absolutely.
education,
Yeah.
housing. These are
Yeah.
human needs.
Yeah.
And it just gives people a foundation to then be able to build, grow, and then eventually get out of that system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing, exactly. Like the squatting, like as a temporary solution would work, but only if there's a pathway, like you say, to then buy a house or move into a rental.
That's the thing. At the end of it, there's no guarantee that they have stable housing. Like they're squatting for now, but what happens when the developer comes knocking? What happens when they get asked to leave? Like then they're out on the street again, and the cycle continues.
The solution can't be squatting.
No.
No.
To me, the awareness can be done via squattings and pages like Purple Pingers and shit rentals. That's the awareness piece that will continue whilst we're still in this crisis, which a property crisis isn't going to be fixed in 6 months, 12 mons. It's going to take a long time.
And that's an issue, right? Because, and he does mention this too, right? Purple Pingers. And because what you're saying, I believe is correct. And it needs to happen, but it's going to take time. So what is a short-term solution? And I agree, squatting probably ethically, I don't know if it works, but is there things maybe from your dad's story, Sav, that start a conversation, or, do we look at short-term rentals versus long-term rentals and trying to alleviate some pressure there? Can councils be doing things like you mentioned, Zaz, on a case-by-case basis? There needs to be something that alleviates this issue whilst we have an opportunity to build up the public housing again, as you say, Chris, if that's even being planned. I just wonder if there's anything that private business can be doing to help support this. Like we also look at obviously developments have been slow in recent years as well for all sorts of reasons that we've addressed recently on this podcast. But, is there a short-term fix while we try and work on the long-term fix?
It's a good question. It's the
maybe
billion-dollar question.
Maybe
right?
maybe that's the one to ponder on, because I don't know if we're going to solve any short-term things here, but we will add some links in the show notes to Purple Pingers, because it is it's also it's an entertaining way to shine the spotlight on the issue. We're going to end on a little bit of sad news today, guys, as well. So one of our original OGs, one of our OGs is leaving us. Zaz?
That's me. Yes. Today is my last episode. What is it, episode 24?
I think so.
We had a good run, guys.
It's good fun.
We didn't quite make 25.
We did. I know the quarter century. But no, it's been a blast. I have really enjoyed, picking your guys' brains for the last 24 episodes. So yeah, today is my last episode. You won't be hearing my voice on the pod anymore. But you know what that does mean is that we've got a spot freed up for some new fresh voices, with lovely Sav and, you know, maybe some exciting guests to come in the future. So I'm excited to be on the other side of the, be on the earphones and not the mic anymore. Be listening. I'll be the number one fan.
You've been an integral part of the foundations, we actually expect to see you pop up in the comments.
Oh God, yeah! Can't wait.
Maybe you can ask some listener questions and still be a part of it that way.
I think that's the real reason Jason's not here today. He was just too upset. He just couldn't handle it.
He said, "I'm going to have to go holiday and cry into a pina colada."
But yes, excited to cheer you all on from the sidelines, of course.
Well, Zaz, very sad. We've loved having you. But we will continue the property conversation because
property now lives on.
Property now continues. So
property forever, we should call
it. Property.
We're
always.
rebranding.
Property never ending.
Property eternity.
Unlike this episode, which probably needs to end right about now.
Round up.
Because we keep waffling on. But that's been us for another episode of Property Now. We'll be back next week without Zaz, but we'll be tackling the issues and looking forward to it, guys.
Thank you.
Right, cheers.
The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.